My dreams were full of adventures, and today I'll begin a story all my own. It had been quite some time since Cytherea uttered those words upon joining the ranks of Demasia's finest. With a strong heart and dreams of adventure, well, today would be her first nightmare. The harsh winds of the Freljord made it hard to see anything further than a dozen feet, but she did not want to scout so far ahead that she could not see the camp. As she turned back to make sure that the light of the forge was still in sight, she saw a member of the vanguard running toward her, waving his hands in the air and drawing his weapon. She slowly turned around and came face to face with a massive white wolf. Frozen by terror and the cold, she could not move or make a sound. She didn't know how long it had been there, and now, with her back to the camp, did not know how long it would take her reinforcement to reach her. The soldier screamed as he ran past her, and she too drew her weapon to strike down the beast. But before they could close the distance, the unnamed soldier tripped in the snow and began a disastrous belly slide toward the wolf, who took the approaching prey with no mercy. With the horror of her ally's fate still laid out in front of her, it's no wonder she was blind to the approaching Avarosans. Back in the Demasian camp, the smith screamed for reinforcements. He had an eye for details, and the slight shift in the background of the valley let him know a massive force was approaching. Soldiers began to pour out of the camp to Cytherea's aid, but the cold weather staggered them. Ash, said by some to be Avarosa herself reborn, stepped to the forefront of the Outriders, taking in the scene before her. Two women seemed locked in a struggle with a hungry wolf, and a man in leathers with a large hammer was making his way toward them. These people were already poised for battle, and she didn't think they'd be open to a peaceful resolution. She gave the order, and knocked an arrow of true ice against the larger of the two women in front of the wolf. She fell to her knees, and as the wolf went for the kill, Ash took aim at Cytherea. Seemingly unaware of the amount of power focused in her direction, Cytherea charged at the wolf, unwilling to let another comrade die. But the true ice froze her in place, leaving her to watch helplessly as the smith who had rallied the initial charge on her behalf ran past her and tackled the wolf to the ground, while Ash took Cytherea out. By now, a full-on battle was underway in a valley between two mountains somewhere near the outskirts of the Freljord. The Silverwings, who had come along only as a last resort, were loaded up with riders and had taken to the skies. They had to maintain a low altitude, hoping for the mountain's summit to keep the wind at bay. This strategy played against them, as wolves who had made their homes higher up leapt down onto the Silverwings, eager to taste new meat for the first time in their lives. More Avarosans flooded into the valley, and the length of the conflict played against the Demasians, who were so unused to fighting in such conditions. In the face of Freljordian chill and Avarosa reborn, what hope could a soldier have, even ones as strong as the vanguard? Ash began to grow impatient. She began to make preparations for an enchanted crystal arrow, and a soldier on horseback seemed to set a course for her, mistaking her irritation for a moment of weakness. She knocked another arrow, and the horseman changed course. She let it fly after him, but it was intercepted by another, who stumbled and was hastily finished off by one of the beasts from the mountain. A second fleet of Silverwings took to the air. Seeing the fate which befell their brethren, they were so focused on the wolves that they did not notice the approaching outline of the cryo-phoenix, Anivia. Demasian horses were bred for combat, so it is of no surprise that the Avarosans and their wild-caught horses did not stand a chance in this regard. With this small victory in the middle of a larger conflict, Demacia started to gain some ground, and perhaps some hope. Hope was the strength for Demacia, and reinforcements from the camp were coming in more quickly now, and in higher density. For a moment, they seemed to hold the numbers advantage over the Freljordian natives. Ash let loose the unmistakable call of the War Mother, wanting to take no chances against this seemingly endless wave of invaders. Anivia answered the call and descended upon the battlefield, as Avarosan marksmen took their position in the higher grounds now that the wolves had cleared out of them. The Demacians seemed unfazed by the ancestral call to arms, and more riders came forth as they grew accustomed to the snowy terrain. The sight of reinforcements temporarily distracted Ashe, who took a long-range shot at one of the new riders and knocked him to the ground, and she was slow to hear the approaching hoofbeats muffled in the snow. The mounted vanguard from earlier was poising a spear, taking aim at Anivia as she laid waste to the battle below her. The man was set to collide with Ashe, and with neither noticing the other until too late, they could do nothing but turn their attacks onto one another. She didn't have time to knock an arrow, and instead jammed it into the chest of the warhorse as it collided with her. Ashe and the horse both fell. The rider did not seem like he would be able to move the horse that had fallen on top of him anytime soon, and Ashe slipped momentarily out of consciousness. Reinforcements on both sides continued to enter the fray, and Anivia seemed to be the only one who noticed Ashe had fallen. In a fit of rage, Anivia doubled down on the winds in the valley. The Avarosans would surely notice the chill, but the invaders should be crippled by it. Instead, they all rallied together into a lined formation. So close together, the chill was harder to notice despite Anivia's best efforts, and despite a number disadvantage, the vanguard began their final push toward reclaiming the valley they had set up camp in. While they managed to gain some ground on the Avarosans, Anivia ate the brunt of the blow and would need only a moment to recover. Ashe began to open her eyes, and the vanguard readied to strike again before she could fully regain her composure. But it takes time to regroup in the snow, and Ashe let her crystal arrow fly into the heart of the enemy ranks moments prior to their final charge. A lone rider managed to avoid the frost, but without the strength of the formation behind him, he was able to accomplish very little. As more Avarosans gathered to answer the War Mother's call, Ashe and Anivia rose to their feet. The entire might of the Freljord pushed forward to drive the invaders away once and for all. Demacian formation, textbook as always, began to line up their defenses against the final assault. If they could just make it through this final push, then perhaps... But the lone horseman, who had already done more than anyone could be asked of, seek to make a name for himself among the Demacian legends with one final cleave of his sword, one strike to win the valley for Demacia. But the combined frost of Anivia and Ashe is too much for any man out of his element to bear, and as the cold finally took his sword arm, the nameless horseman realized he would remain nameless, and Demacia was forced to retreat from the valley.